Most families will die not because they lacked food, water, or weapons, but because they hesitated. In the critical window between the first warning signal and the moment a disaster becomes unsurvivable, the average person loses between 4 and 11 minutes to confusion, denial, and indecision. Researchers at the University of Stavanger studying evacuation behavior during real emergencies documented what they call milling behavior, a phenomenon where individuals, instead of acting, repeatedly seek confirmation from others around them before moving. In a house fire, a chemical spill, a flash flood, or a grid-down scenario, those 4 to 11 minutes are frequently the difference between life and death. Your family does not have a survival problem. Your family has a mapping problem. The term safe zone is one of the most dangerously misunderstood concepts in civilian emergency planning. Most people instinctively think of safety as a place, a basement, a shelter, a government facility. But emergency management science defines a safe zone not as a static location, but as a dynamic corridor of reduced risk. The Federal Emergency Management Agency's own field doctrine emphasizes that safety is a function of time, distance, and shielding, none of which are permanently fixed to any single address. A basement that protects you during a tornado becomes a drowning chamber during a flood. A highway that represents your escape route during a wildfire becomes a cremation corridor when wind direction shifts. The location is not the variable. Your real-time relationship to the hazard is the variable, and failing to understand this kills people every single disaster cycle. What most families build, if they build anything at all, is what survival analysts call a single-node plan. One meeting spot. One route out of the neighborhood. One assumption about which direction danger will come from. This is catastrophically fragile thinking. Network theory, the same science used to design resilient electrical grids and military communication systems, demonstrates that any system with only one node and one pathway fails completely the moment that single connection is severed. Your family's escape plan is a network. It must be designed with redundancy, with alternate nodes, with pre-calculated fallback positions, because in a real emergency, your primary route will statistically be compromised. Studies of wildfire evacuations in California between 2017 and 2021 found that in over 60% of fatal cases, victims were traveling on their intended evacuation route when they were overtaken. They had a plan. The plan had no redundancy. They died on the right road. The hidden science that almost no civilian planner applies is called Isochrone mapping, a technique borrowed from urban logistics and military operational planning. An isochrone map does not simply show you where places are. It shows you where you can reach within a specific time window, accounting for real-world conditions like road capacity, terrain, and population density under stress. When a mass evacuation event begins, traffic modeling from the Oak Ridge National Laboratory shows that standard road networks reach functional gridlock within 90 minutes in urban areas and within 3 to 4 hours even in suburban corridors. This means your escape window, your viable isochrone, collapses rapidly after the event becomes publicly known. Families who move in the first 30 minutes operate in a completely different survival landscape than families who move 2 hours later. The roads are the same. The physics of 10,000 panicking vehicles are not. Your survival plan must therefore be built around what emergency planners call pre-threshold departure, leaving before the official order arrives, based on your own trigger criteria. This is not recklessness. This is the application of rational risk calculus. You identify your personal trigger conditions in advance. A specific weather alert level, a defined radius of an industrial incident, a confirmed grid failure lasting beyond a threshold duration. When that condition is met, your family moves, not because an authority told you to, but because your plan already made the decision. Research published in the International Journal of Disaster Risk Reduction consistently shows that households with pre-written trigger criteria evacuate an average of 68 minutes faster than households that wait for official guidance. In a rapidly evolving disaster, 68 minutes is not a statistic. It is survival margin measured in human lives. Mapping your escape routes requires you to think in layers, not lines. You do not draw one arrow pointing out of your neighborhood. You identify primary, secondary, and tertiary corridors across at least 3 different directional axes from your home. You locate physical choke points, bridges, rail crossings, tunnel underpasses, and you plan around them, because those structures will fail first under evacuation load or disaster damage. Every bridge in your evacuation corridor is a single point of failure. Civil engineering records maintained by the American Society of Civil Engineers show that in the United States alone, over 42% of bridges are classified as structurally deficient or functionally obsolete. In a disaster scenario involving seismic activity, flooding, or prolonged grid failure, these structures become impassable, not gradually, but suddenly and without warning. A family whose only westward escape route crosses a river bridge is not planning an evacuation. They are planning a potential trap. Your mapping process must physically identify every bridge, every underpass, every narrow 2-lane choke point on each of your planned corridors, and for each one, you must have a pre-identified bypass, a farm road, a dry riverbed crossing, an elevated terrain path. That keeps your family moving even when the primary infrastructure collapses beneath the weight of 10,000 other vehicles all making the same mistake at the same moment. Terrain analysis is the second layer of competent escape mapping, and it is almost universally ignored by civilian planners. The discipline of terrain analysis comes from military land navigation doctrine, and its core principle is simple but powerful. Terrain either enables movement or denies it, and that relationship changes with conditions. A dirt road through agricultural land is a viable secondary escape route in dry summer conditions. That same road becomes an impassable mud channel after 48 hours of rain. An elevated ridgeline offers both visual advantage and separation from flood-prone valley corridors, but that same elevation becomes a lightning and wind exposure risk during severe storm systems. You must map your routes not as static lines on paper but as condition-dependent pathways, each annotated with the specific environmental scenarios under which they remain viable and the conditions under which they must be abandoned. This level of analysis is not paranoia. It is the same methodology applied by search and rescue teams, wildfire incident commanders, and military route clearance units, professionals whose decisions about terrain directly determine whether people live or die. The third and most psychologically difficult layer of family survival mapping involves what emergency behavioralists call separation protocols. In a sudden onset disaster, an explosion, a rapid wildfire progression, a civil emergency, your family members will statistically not be in the same location. Research conducted after the 2011 Tohoku earthquake and tsunami in Japan found that the majority of families who lost members did so not because no escape route existed, but because family members wasted critical survival time attempting to physically reunite before evacuating. Parents drove back into danger zones to retrieve children who had already been evacuated by schools. Spouses waited at home for partners who were already moving toward safety on alternate routes. The emotional drive to be physically together before moving is one of the most powerful and most lethal instincts in a disaster scenario. Your plan must override this instinct with pre-agreed logic, designated rally points at progressive distances from home, a clear communication hierarchy, and an explicitly stated rule that each family member moves to the next rally point on a fixed time schedule regardless of whether others have arrived, leaving a physical marker or pre-agreed digital signal at each point to confirm their passage. Rally point selection follows a precise set of criteria drawn from both emergency management field doctrine and urban search and rescue methodology. A valid rally point must be on high ground relative to flood risk, structurally independent meaning not attached to any building that could collapse or burn, recognizable under low visibility conditions including smoke, darkness, and psychological stress, reachable by multiple approach routes from different directions, and defensible in the sense that it offers visual sight lines and is not enclosed in a way that creates entrapment risk. A parking lot at an elevated intersection outside your immediate neighborhood frequently satisfies more of these criteria than the emotionally obvious choice of a school, a church, or a community center, all of which become dangerously overcrowded, structurally stressed, and logistically compromised within hours of a major disaster event. The science of crowd dynamics, documented extensively in post-disaster forensic analysis, shows that enclosed gathering points with limited exits generate secondary casualties through compression injuries, trampling, and panic-driven structural failures at a rate that rivals the original disaster itself. Your completed family survival map is not a single document. It is a layered system: terrain-annotated route maps, condition-based decision trees, timed rally point schedules, and personal trigger criteria, all stored in waterproof physical copies distributed across every member of your family old enough to read and act independently. The families who survive are not the ones who had the most supplies. They are the ones who had already made every critical decision before the disaster forced the question. The map is not the territory, but in a collapse scenario, the family with the map controls the territory. Every other family is simply reacting, and in the geography of survival, reaction is almost always too late.